there, and welcome to Central Texas Gardener. I'm Tom Spencer. Last year, homegrown food made a huge rebound. Along with vegetables, many people want to produce their own fruit. Since the time is ripe to plant fruit trees, today Drew Demler selects a few top performers and explains how to grow them. On tour, meet some gardeners who carry on Lady Bird's mission.
It's not unusual for people to begin or end their day with a trek along Lady Bird Lake, formerly Town Lake. Along the way, they may run into some of the people who carry on the legacy that Lady Bird Johnson envisioned in the 1970s. As Lady Bird Johnson Adopt-A-Garden caretakers, they ensure the integrity and beauty of the trail into the future.
Obviously, we beautify some areas that, didn't look so nice. But then in addition to that, I think really the greatest thing we do is that we provide an avenue for people to express this profound affection for the trail that Austinites have.
Every February, the Town Lake Trail Foundation auctions off the gardens to help pay for trail improvements and to enlist helping hands for a year.
What we did was to choose spots that were relatively small, discreet gardens that needed individual care. They were getting generalized maintenance, but not kind of tender, loving care.
Adopter Mary Arnett saw how she could make a difference at a neglected enclosure near Longhorn Dam.
And I drove by here and looked at it. It's close to where I work, so I thought, well, I could stop by and work on it before I go to work. That would be nice to do.
With a grant from Austin Energy, she repaired the broken water fountain, controlled erosion, and removed invasive trees and shrubs. She enlisted volunteers, including a landscape architect, to build benches into the stonework, and with plants, create a meditative sanctuary.
I've been amazed at how a little spot, just making a little bright spot like that along the trail, just attracts people to it. It's so rewarding to watch them enjoy it. You can stand back and see them be amazed at your flowers. Every single time I'm here, someone tells me thank you.
Dan Garrison and his team of volunteers also renewed an old garden.
This is Cactus Pryor's garden. It was donated on behalf to the Town Lake Trail and to the citizens of Austin on behalf of the Headliners Club back in 1979, and it was dedicated to Cactus Pryor, who is a local celebrity. He's been around forever, doing radio shows here in Austin, and everybody seems to love Cactus, and he's a real character.
They cleaned things up and added new plants. Old and new are Spartans, since their only supplemental water is what the Cactus team hauls in buckets from the lake.
We do it because the Parks Department doesn't have enough resources to take care of all the parkland they have.
Their work carries on a legacy, passed down from the headliners and the volunteers who seeded wildflowers along the trail years ago.
It makes you feel great. When we were out here doing the planting, we had buckets of sod around, we had dirt, and we had all sorts of shovels and everything, rakes and everything. And every single person that came by would say, "Thank you, it looks great. Thank you so much for what you're doing." And it was just a great feeling, and it is every time that we come out here to take care of it.
When a nursery adopted a garden under MOPAC, they continued Roberta Crenshaw's mission to champion Austin's parkland and the greenbelt around its in-town lake. Like all the gardens, it testifies to plants that stand up to tough conditions.
For one thing, this particular spot, we get a lot of either intense sun or complete shade because of the overpasses for MOPAC. So it's not a typical location for a garden.
But since many gardeners do face that challenge, unrelenting sun or shade, they can run by for ideas to try at home.
Yeah, we figured if it can't make it here, it really can't make it in a garden in Austin. I'm amazed how many people, when we're down here working on the garden, how many people come by and just ask questions. What is that plant? How does that work in my garden? Thank you so much for doing this. I mean, it really is fulfilling.
Jenny Peterson, Dale Glover, and their team go for low-maintenance plants that offer as much refreshment as a drink after a long journey on the trail.
The Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association adopted this garden, mostly because we are a group of people who are dedicated to improving the quality of life in the downtown area, whether you're living here, working here, playing here.
It's a chance for downtown residents to nurture a plant in the ground and to illustrate that a garden doesn't have to be big to be enjoyable.
It connects you to the outdoors, to really, I think, a place deep inside people that they want to connect with after having a crazy, hectic day at work inside. Gets them outside and breathing and connected to other people and growing things. And I think we all need that on some level.
A couple of years ago, my husband and I, he works over in that building right down the trail. We started jogging on the trail. And we would jog by this little garden here, and we noticed one day that there was a sign that said, "This garden is up for adoption." And so it was right around Valentine's Day, and I had to ask for that for Valentine's Day. So that was my Valentine's Day present 2 years ago.
Karen selected plants that glow by day and in moonlight.
This is a real meditative spot. People come here to think and to read, and I just wanted to have it to be sort of a calming place.
To support her legacy, her employer, Dr. Adam Schneider, devised a pump in a toolbox to water the garden. But she wasn't there to water the dry summer when she was injured. A mystery gardener took over, a fitness instructor that Karen met months later.
They love this spot. They do yoga and they do stretching out here. And they wanted to replant the garden because they wanted to really bring some good positive energy back to this spot. So I was very fortunate to have someone take care of my garden for me when I wasn't able to.
Sanchez elementary teacher Juanita Juarez and her 5th graders also want to take care of what's important to them.
It's something that they use regularly on their own with their family. They come by this playscape and this garden, so we really wanted them to have a part in improving their community.
They painted trash cans and benches to liven things up. Every week they come to weed, pick up litter, and tend their plants. They discover what it takes for a plant to grow.
Some plants need a certain amount of water, or some plants need shade or light, and they give us oxygen.
Watering is as much fun as learning a lesson in valuable resources.
We get a lot of exercise when we come out here. And it's like when we get the water from the lake for the plants, well, it's fun because we get to watch fishes swim around and stuff.
Ms. Margaret Crow has been our sponsor for a couple of years, and she's been wonderful with helping with the adoption of the garden, purchasing plants, giving us tips, everything that we could possibly ask for, and the kids, are really grateful. We're really grateful for her help.
A helping hand makes a difference since adopters pay for their plants, mulch, and tools.
We provide lavish praise, and the garden adopters provide everything else.
No pesticides are allowed, and soil amendments and fertilizers must be organic.
More castings help the plants, and they're kind of gross too.
What's gross about it?
It's worm poop.
That may not have been in the first mission statement, but it certainly was the ultimate mission when dreamers went to work.
As a group, the Town Lake Trail Foundation feels as though we're kind of picking up the torch from that generation of people.
We try to clean it every time we come so that so that people will notice that we're trying to help.
You can find out more about the Lady Bird Johnson Adopt-A-Gardens at townlaketrail.org. Joining me now is Drew Demler. Drew's welcome back to Central Texas Gardener.
Thank you.
Drew and I are going to be visiting about fruit trees for Central Texas that can grow in tight spaces. Drew is a fruit tree expert and also one of the creators of bluecollargardeners.com. And as I said, it's a pleasure to have you back on the program.
Thank you. It's been a while. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. Well, growing your own food is one of the most popular topics in gardening right now. Everybody seems to be on that. They really want to be able to say that they've grown their own produce or vegetables, what have you. Fruit trees, there are a lot of well-adapted varieties here, but they take up a lot of space for the most part.
They can. We talked about pears and certain other varieties that can get really, really large. Mm-hmm. And I know with today, especially in the newer houses and in the urban areas, the homes tend to be smaller and the lot sizes definitely tend to be smaller. Right. So a lot of people are looking for something that can fit into those smaller spaces.
Right. Well, that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I guess a good place to start is just to talk about the availability of fruit trees generally, because at this time of year in January is when the nurseries really tend to load up. Before we start talking about the varieties of fruit trees, let's tell people what they're going to see in the nurseries. Most of the fruit trees come in bare root, right?
That's right. You're usually going to have two choices. You can either get container-grown trees, which are available mostly throughout the year, and then especially this year, this time of year, January, in the wintertime, is when you find your bare root stock. And it's a great way to start a tree. You know, typically they're less expensive, and you usually have a lot better selection of varieties to choose from with the bare roots.
Right, and that's what the nurseries load up with.
That's right, that's right. And they're just as easy to plant. You know, a lot of people get confused by it because you don't see them the rest of the year. It's just this really, you know, defined period of time in the winter when they're available. They're very easy to plant. You just want to make sure when you do plant them, number one, it's best to plant them when they're still dormant, when there's no leaves on them. And then when you do plant them, you want to make sure that you water them in really good and make sure that you pack the soil in down around all those loose roots and don't leave any air pockets. Other than that, it's very similar to planting any other type of tree, and they should go on ahead and grow just great for you. Okay, so don't be afraid of the bare roots. Don't be, not at all. Just don't buy them late in the season. That's what I tell people. That's right, that's right. You definitely want to try to get to them when the leaves are still off, when they're good and dormant, and they're sleeping. That's when you want to plant them. Okay, so that's what folks will find for the most part. Now let's talk about varieties. Now, one of the groups or varieties of fruit that you recommend that you can find some dwarfs are apples, which surprises me. That's right. You don't typically think of Central Texas as being good apple-growing country. We still think of it in places like New York, Michigan, Washington State, but you can grow good apples here. And I think people are surprised at the varieties of apples that you can grow. You can grow Fuji, we can grow Gala, Granny Smith. Three of the most popular varieties. Three of the most popular, definitely. Yellow Delicious. And yes, they're probably one of the very best fruits if you're looking for something that you can grow as a dwarf. There's a couple of different root stocks. It's the root stocks that control the size of the apple tree. And the best choices as far as a dwarf root stock are one called M9 and another one called M7. M9 or M7. M7. M is in Mary. Exactly. And for people who aren't familiar with the term rootstock, most of these fruit trees are grafted onto, you'll find, say, a Gala apple grafted onto some kind of rootstock. That's correct. That's exactly right. And when they go to the nurseries, is there any way for them to tell what kind of rootstock? You should be able to have that information. Where you're purchasing the trees from or where you're looking for them should be able to tell you what rootstock each variety of tree is on. That's very important. It's a very important piece of information. It's ultimately going to tell you how well it's going to do with this area wood and then also the size of the tree like we're talking about. So you need to be able to find that out. Okay. So, and I think, that's another reason why people should shop at the locally owned nurseries. Places. That's correct. I bet you're not going to be able to get somebody to answer that question in a lot of the big chain stores. Probably not. Yeah. Probably not. So, M9 or M7? 7. Two best choices for dwarf and stock on apples for sure. Okay. And again, Golden Delicious, Granny Smith, Gala, those are all pretty good ones. Good apples, aren't they? Yeah. I think a lot of people are surprised, that those varieties come from places that are pretty warm, New Zealand, Australia, places like that, and they fit really well in here. So okay. Well, there are other varieties of fruit that people can grow in tight spaces. Now, one that you wanted to talk about is figs, and I think of figs as being a kind of a sprawling plant. They can be. They're more shrub form, but they're very, very easy to control their size with a little bit of pruning work. And there's a variety out there called blackjack. That's a really good one. If you're looking for one that's going to stay small, it maybe only gets about 6-7 feet tall and fits into a smaller space really well. It's a natural dwarf. Okay. Blackjack. Okay, blackjack fig. What are some of your other favorite varieties of fig for this area? I like Alma. That's a yellow variety. The old brown turkey is still good. Now, that one is going to get maybe a little bigger than some of the others. It's one of those where you'd see it in those old farms where they're real wide and maybe 15 feet tall or so.
So it requires a heavy pruning hand.
Exactly, but that's still a really good variety of fig. Okay. Very good.
Another variety of fruit that you're real big on are the Satsumas.
Yes. Now I want to specify. A Satsuma is one you would want to wait till spring, till we warm up a bit to plant it.
Okay.
But it's fantastic. It's not a very big tree itself. I've seen them in this area that were 10, 12 years old that were only about 6, 7 feet tall. Satsuma, for people who aren't familiar, it's a type of citrus that's very, very closely related to a tangerine. And it's probably been 20 years since we've had a cold snap strong enough to do any real damage. I grow one in Cedar Park. In fact, I grow several varieties in Cedar Park, unprotected through the winters, no problem.
Yeah.
And they stay small enough. If we did get a really cold spell come through, they're easy to blanket very easily with a frost cloth or even an old blanket that you have around the house and keep them warm enough.
Okay. Well, as we move into the springtime here with the fruit trees, a lot of people have questions about how do you take care of them.
Right.
With fruit trees, dealing with insects during the wintertime is always a smart thing to do. There's a little critter called the plum curculio that attacks a lot of the pitted fruits, plums, peaches, things like that. What do we do at this time of year to protect some of these small trees?
The best thing you can do this time of year is you want to coat as much of the entire tree that you can reach with dormant oil.
Okay.
If you're an organic gardener, use neem. Works very well. The best time to apply it is a warm day in the wintertime when all the leaves are off, and you can put it on there pretty thick. A lot of times people will do multiple applications, and I recommend that. Maybe do it once in January, once again in February. And again, you want to coat the trunk, the branches, as much of the area as you can, and that suffocates any overwintering larvae or eggs that may be on the tree. Gives you a clean slate.
Okay. Real briefly, there's a new product out there that you wanted to highlight, and we only have a short time to do that, but let's talk about it.
No problem. It's called Surround, and it's made out of kale and clay. It's a wettable powder, so you just mix it up in a sprayer and apply it just like you would anything else. And you use that during the growing season, and you can apply it to your fruit. You cover the fruit, and it makes this fine gray dust. And the insects can't tunnel through that into the fruit. It does need to be reapplied several times throughout the season, usually about once every 2 weeks, but it's a physical barrier. So there's not called Surround. So there's no resistance issues. You can use it as much as you need.
Okay. Well, Drew, we're going to have to wrap it up on that note. I real briefly want to add that you were touting to me earlier that you like to fertilize now twice a year, which is spring and then the fall.
And fall.
All right. But we'll leave folks with that information. We do appreciate you being a part of our programming and hope that folks will get to the nurseries and select some of those trees.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Hi, and welcome to Down to Earth. Our question this week is what to do about plants that have frozen. This is going to be a common problem this year. It's kind of a weird winter. We're a little colder maybe than we're used to, although probably not historically all that cold. A lot of people have moved to putting desert plants in their yard, such as agaves, and these probably did get pretty mushy, especially if they're from a low desert area. What I would recommend doing is not removing the plant at this time necessarily. If it still has a turgid heart, that is, the center of the plant still has some firmness to it, I would go ahead and leave that plant and see if it makes some pups next year so you can actually save the plant and propagate it from those pups that are made. You can also go ahead and remove the summer annuals if they froze back and any other plants that may have frozen back, or cut back any perennials that you have. And if you just have frostbite tips on those plants, you can go ahead and ignore that for right now until the plant starts growing again, because trimming off those frozen tips will encourage growth, and if we have another warm spell and then another cold spell, that would be bad for the plant. Our plant of the week this week is a Christmas cactus. You may have gotten one for Christmas or even maybe for Thanksgiving a while back, and now it's been in your house for a while and you're not really sure what to do with it. It is a tropical plant and not a true cactus, so it likes high humidity. And I recommend to keep those in a container in your house on a sunny window or maybe on a shady patio and bring it in if we get a cold winter, so don't put it out right now. They like bright, filtered light, and a south or west window which would have bright light may be a little too warm for them, so watch them very carefully. Water them only when the soil is almost completely dry. even though they're tropical, they don't like wet soil. They're epiphytic, they grow high up into trees, and they don't normally have a lot of soil. These plants do need long nights to flower, which is why they flower around Christmas time. They do drop their buds when they're stressed, so if it's overly hot or dry in your house or the soil is dry, you will notice the buds will stop to drop off of the plant. As the plant gets older, the stems also may harden and look woody at the base. This is pretty normal, and what I would recommend you do at that time is remove some of the pads and propagate it. These plants get about 18 inches tall and 18 inches wide. They may start to kind of lay down a little bit in the center when they get heavy with those longer branches that they make. So again, if that looks unsightly, you might remove some of those pads and propagate it. If you do need to repot it, if it gets fairly large, put it in a container that's only one size larger than what it came out of. So if it was in a 4-inch pot, move it to a 5-inch pot, not to an 8-inch pot. To do this month, you need to pick up coffee grounds for your compost. Your compost pile won't be very active right now, but adding coffee grounds will be great for it. For more things to do in your garden, call your local extension office or visit the new CTG website. And also, we'd love to hear from you, so send us your question or plant of the week from your garden to klru.org/CTG.
Thanks, Daphne. Now let's check in with Trisha Shirey for Backyard Basics.
One of my favorite fruit trees is the persimmon tree. It's super easy to grow, and there are persimmons that are very small, and so they can fit into any yard, and they have very few pest problems. You don't have to do a lot of spraying. The wood is very hard. In fact, it was used to make wood iron golf clubs for many years, and still is. And since it's so strong, borer damage is just not something that you have with those. So if you are into low input fruit trees, persimmons are a good tree. And many of the varieties are fruitful or self-fruitful. They don't need a pollinator, and they produce a lot of fruit in a very short time. You often have 30 to 40 fruit on a tree by its second year, and before too long you are inundated with persimmons, and that can be a nice thing. Now there are different sizes of fruit. One of the most productive trees is the taninashi, which is these smaller fruit here, but the fuyu is a good one. Chia is another one that I've had great success with here. And when you harvest your persimmons, you can harvest them while they're still quite hard. And you always want to make sure that you're getting the calyx too when you cut it from the tree. Sometimes it's best just to go ahead and cut the little branch with it. And you may have to use a basket to harvest them when they're hard. It's a little bit tricky to harvest them when they start to get soft on the tree because they bruise so easily. And that's one reason why we don't see persimmons in grocery stores that often, except for the very firm persimmons, and those aren't really my favorites to eat. Now, I like to just put them on a tray or in a basket where they're in a single layer and bring them indoors from October and November before they're quite soft. Now, if you eat them when they're hard, they're very astringent. They have a lot of tannins and they taste bad. Cold weather or time will develop those, will make those tannins break down so that they're not astringent tasting, but they almost have a chalky flavor if you eat one when they're bad, and I promise you, you will think that you don't like persimmons if you eat them that way. They really need to have almost a jelly or a pudding-like consistency before you eat them, and so when one is soft enough so that you actually can leave a fingerprint in the side of the persimmon, then that's a soft, ripe persimmon and it won't be astringent. Now, like I said, there are some like tamapan that can be eaten when they're firm and are not astringent, but these are the astringent variety. So once they start to get soft, they can be refrigerated for about 5 to 7 days, and then they go bad very quickly, so it's nice to have some ways to preserve and store them. One of the things I like to do is take a persimmon and just slice off slices, put it on parchment paper, put it on a cookie sheet, put that in the freezer until all the slices are very frozen. You want the slices to not be touching as it goes into the freezer. Then once they're frozen, you can put them in a baggie or a plastic container and take out a few slices, put them in a smoothie. A pineapple and persimmon smoothie is one of my very favorites, and I'll be putting the recipe for that on the website. You can also make a delicious persimmon ice cream very quickly in your food processor with cream, sugar, sugar and the persimmon slices, and that also will be on our website. And then you can take the persimmon pulp from ripe persimmons and just put that in a container. I like to add a little lemon juice to it so that it doesn't discolor, but then this could be used for pulp in breads and cookies and all kinds of baked goods, and it keeps them very nice and moist and fresh. And then the easiest way to store your excess persimmons is just to take the ripe persimmons and put them in a freezer bag and store them in the freezer whole. Once they come out of the freezer, they're very soft and ready to use, and you can easily harvest the pulp and separate it from the seeds. So you can enjoy persimmons all year long from the fruits of your harvest in the fall.
Check out our great new website at klru.org/CTG for online video, links, and more tips. Next week we visit Peckerwood Garden. Until then, I'll see you in the garden.
To learn about today's program, watch online, and follow CTG's blog, check out klru.org/CTG.